Well, you take it home and fill it back up. Isaiah chapter 62. We're again in that, just to remind you, we're in that section of Isaiah, that last stretch of Isaiah that has a lot to do with what is yet not future only for Isaiah and those who are originally reading this, but also for us as well. That much of it has to do with millennial kingdom of the Lord when He comes and sets up His kingdom upon the earth, and things will be radically different. We've been talking about this off and on, but things, for example, how Israel's viewed, how Jerusalem is viewed, and how they are, in one sense, almost reverenced in a time to come. We know it's not that way now. It's kind of interesting to take a quick side road. Jerusalem is a very, very important city to God. And it's important to Orthodox Jews, to be sure. It's important to several different Christians. Some Muslims find it very, very important, a very important city. And it's really, in one sense, somewhat surprising because of its location. It really, for a capital city and one to hold the kind of intrigue that it does, it's really in an odd location for that. It's not a port city. It's not a city that has an abundance of water. It's not a city that is really beautiful in the respect of, you might think, a lot of greenery and that kind of thing, a lot of vegetation. Even though those things are there, it's just surprising that it is such an important city. That all through the Old Testament, well, not all through, when you get into the life of David and then on, it becomes such an important place, and it's kind of hard getting there, and especially if you're walking, it'd be really hard, and it's just surprising. We're even encouraged to pray for the peace of Jerusalem, and even because of that, it becomes such a focal point of God's redemptive plan. And we're going to see that tonight. Again, the emphasis upon Jerusalem and how important it is in God's plan and God's things. So let's begin looking at it. In chapter 62, verse 1. And by the way, it's going to fall into three different sections. There's going to be the prophet's prayer. And then we're going to be following that with the watchman's responsibilities. And then, of course, it's going to be the preparation for the Messiah, or the preparation for the coming Christ, the King. And as we look at that and begin unpacking it, you can see how this has to be, in many respects, future, because of the kind of experience that's being described here. So, begin with the prophets, or Isaiah's prayer. I will not keep silent because of Zion, and I will not keep still because of Jerusalem, until her righteousness shines like a bright light, and her salvation like a flaming torch. So, the opening part of his prayer, again, is focused on Jerusalem, but notice the descriptive words that he uses to emphasize that. I will not keep silent because of Zion. I will not keep still because of Jerusalem. And then why? What's his objective there? Until her righteousness shines like a bright light and her salvation like a flaming torch. Now, when Isaiah was writing this, Jerusalem wasn't that far in the future going to be destroyed. When I say destroyed, I mean destroyed. It was going to be rubble. It was going to be just briars and the weeds growing up around it, because of what the Babylonians were going to do when they came into Jerusalem and they would finally conquer it. And it was going to devastate it. Jerusalem's going to be destroyed again. In AD 70, it would be destroyed. And when I say destroyed, I mean just that. It was destroyed by General Titus and the Roman army, and they just devastated the whole area. So even in Isaiah's future, You see, he's praying for something that is yet far future. Something about this particular city that he was praying for, that it would be a beacon of righteousness. And her salvation would be like a flaming torch. Something that would gather attention, something that could not easily be overlooked. That the city is going to be like this. And when is it going to be like that? Well, I can't say historically it's ever been that way. I can't say it's currently that it's that way. But one day, don't underestimate the seriousness and the impact of the word righteous. It's going to be a place of righteousness. It's going to shine forth. And then it's going to also be like a torch, unmistakable in that respect. Verse 2, nations will see your righteousness and all kings your glory. And you will be given a new name that the Lord's mouth will announce. You will be a glorious crown in the Lord's hand, and a royal diadem in the palm of your God's hand. All right, there's another interesting dynamic going on here. The city now, the nations will see your righteousness. That's obviously not today. I mean, if you look at any major city today, do you think you're going to see righteousness? Not a trick question. I mean, you don't see righteousness, do you? Even in Jerusalem, you will not see righteousness. But here, one day, it will be a righteous place. All kings will see your glory, your importance, your heaviness, meaning the significance of the city. Because there's going to be a reason why that city, Jerusalem, is going to become a place of righteousness. There's a reason why that city is going to become a place where all the kings of the earth are going to recognize its righteousness. And that's because the righteous king is going to be reigning from Jerusalem. You follow that? Okay. And then we go a bit further and talk about in verse 3, well, the end of verse 2, you will be given a new name that the Lord's mouth will announce. The importance of a name is quite significant, biblically speaking. Names were not simply chosen on the basis that it sounds good, or you like the way it looks when you write it out, or things like that. We don't do names probably with the kind of care that people of yesteryear did. But a name was considered to reflect something about what was named. A good example of this is Jacob. Abraham, Isaac, Jacob. Jacob simply means supplanter. It means schemer. He's crooked. He's a conniver. And you can see in Jacob's life, that's exactly what he was, wasn't he? That's exactly what he was. And then on the way back when he's coming back home, on the J-book, when he sent everybody else ahead, he stayed behind, and he wrestled with a mysterious person all night. And this person that he wrestled with all night gave Jacob a new name. Israel. Gave him a new name. And Jacob wanted to know this mysterious individual's his name. And that this individual would not give him that name. Whatever his name was, he withheld that. We can even, when Gabriel announced to Mary, and then later in a dream to Joseph, that the one that she would bear, he had a particular name, an important name. Actually, it would have been pronounced something close to Yeshua, We have it translated into Greek and then thereby from Greek into English as Jesus. And that name has a very important significance. It means God is salvation. It reflects exactly what Jesus was going to do. And we could do that on and on with different places. Even the name of places became quite significant. Back to Jacob, he's fleeing his brother. He's going back to his mother's family, and he's on his way there. He stops and he rests for the night. He grabs a near rock. He took that rock and he used it as a pillow. That's an amazing thing to me right there. But he laid his head on a rock, and that's when he had the dream. He saw this, we call it, some say ladder, other translations render it as a staircase that extends from earth to heaven, and there are angels ascending and descending on this ladder. And when Jacob woke up, he thought, this is a very special place. So he named it something. Beth El, basically Bethel, means house of God. So names are important. So Jerusalem is going to receive a new name. That new name is going to be given by God Himself. And then, verse 4, it says, you will no longer be called deserted. Now you may have a translation that uses a Hebrew word, transliterates it, instead of translates it. This one translates it. And your land will not be called desolate. Instead, you will be called my delight in her. And your land married. Now, anybody have a different word there? What is it?
Beulah.
Beulah. Do you know what Beulah means? Married. That's what it means. You remember the old song, Beulah Land? Yeah, Beulah Land. Yeah. Yeah, you know, it sounds good, but probably most people singing Beulah Land has no idea what it means. But it does mean married. Now this is good. This is good. Because it's talking about the restoration that God Himself is going to bring to Jerusalem, and thereby it will expand outward from that. But it's going to it's changing everything. Let me give you an example of what I'm talking about. There is a particular prophet in the Old Testament that was given very, very unusual instructions by God, that his life was going to become a living parable. His life was going to reflect the relationship that God had with His people Israel, the sons of Israel, children of Israel, and his life is going to exemplify that. His name is Hosea, which, by the way, is very close to Yeshua, meaning the same basic thing. Anyway, Hosea was commanded to marry a particular woman. I always pronounce it Gomer, but it's like I always thought of Gomer Pyle when I said that. Some say it Gomer. Maybe Gomer is probably a better way of saying it. Anyway, he married this woman, and we find that they have a child. And they name that child. And they have another child. Oh, actually, it didn't say they have another child. It says she has another child. Interesting. Don't miss that. And then there's a third child. And then a couple of those kids named. One was not my people. And as time goes on, she shows herself to be a very unfaithful wife. And she chases after other lovers. And her life spirals downward to the place where actually Hosea divorces her. Enough's enough. He divorces her. Her life continues to spiral downward till she finds herself on a slave block, being sold as a slave. God instructs Hosea to go and buy her back. He does. But when he buys her back, he gives her a very serious ultimatum. This is how you will be from now on. And then, of course, Hosea continues with his prophecies and that kind of thing. It mirrors God's relationship with His people. His people are unfaithful spiritually. They chased other gods. They worshipped other gods. And because of their unfaithfulness, God divorces His people. Jerusalem being the symbol of that people. When did God marry His people? In the Old Testament, you'll find that the people of Israel, the sons of Israel, the children of Israel, are referred to as the wife of Yahweh. And when did that take place? Well, it took place when they struck a marriage covenant. It happened in the desert. It happened on a particular mountain. And there were 10 stipulations that were given. This is what you are to be as my people. And it was actually, it can be thought of this way, as a marriage covenant. Well, Israel did not keep the marriage covenant. And there comes a time when God divorces His people. Now, having said that, now I want you to see what the blessing is. Remember Hosea's example, where it says, you will no longer be called deserted, your land will not be called desolate. Instead, you will be called, my delight is in her. And your land, married, or Beulah. There's a restoration here. A restoration of this relationship between God and His people. You see that? Are you catching on to that particular thing? You see what I'm talking about? There is that restoration that takes place. For the Lord delights in you, and your land will be, again, Beulah, it will be married. And then He's going to give a description of what that looks like. God's restoration of His people. And what this indicates is this loving God, that even though the objects of His love are totally rebellious and they seek their own way and they reject His way, that God doesn't really let go. He has a plan. He has a desire. He has a will. And what He's going to do is He's going to bless once again a people that don't deserve to be blessed. He's going to once again take to Himself a people that don't deserve to be brought to Himself. He's the one doing this. And I can't help but think about Genesis chapter 15 and the powerful illustration of that there. And we've talked about it before, about Abraham and God cutting a covenant. That's what they called it. They would cut a covenant. They'd take animals, certain animals, they'd split them in half. Smaller, like birds or doves or something like that, they wouldn't cut them in half, they'd set them on the side. And the two parties would walk in between them. And the symbolism of walking between them was they have struck an agreement. Your responsibilities are this. My responsibilities are this. And they were to keep that. There was to symbolize, if I break my part of the covenant, may what happened to these animals happen to me. A very, very solemn covenant. Well, if you remember, when Abraham was waiting for God to show up for that cutting of the covenant, when God did finally come, God either, it depends on the translation, you may have as a flaming torch or a burning oven, something related to fire, an image there of some kind of fire that represented God as He, but only God passed through the halves. Abraham didn't. And I don't think I'm making too much of it to point out the symbolism there. God had committed Himself fully to this covenant, and Abraham, and by his descendants, were not held to that covenant to the same degree as God had really committed Himself. All right? So God's going to restore Israel. He's going to restore Jerusalem. For as a young man marries a young woman, and as a groom rejoices over his bride, so your God will rejoice over you. We see in wedding ceremonies, you get kind of a glimpse of that to some degree. Over the years, in weddings that I've officiated, I've seen a lot of things happen probably other people don't see happening. Or at least they don't see it quite as clear as this guy standing right here on my left. What happens when his bride-to-be, when he finally sees her coming through the door. Even if he's seen her in the dress before, I know he's not supposed to. I think sometimes that tradition is probably not honored that much. But something about that moment is very, very powerful. I've had guys just squall. You know what squalling is, right? It's not just crying. It's like that way. And just different things like that. I've seen a lot of emotion at that moment. And that's okay. That's okay. But that's not even close to the kind of celebration that would take place in Jewish weddings of yesteryear. It was a big deal. It was a lot of hooping and hollering and carrying on. I mean, it was really a major event. It was a very joyful event. Jesus even used that as an illustration. That when he came, when he talked about when he sang a dirge, no one wept, and when he celebrated, no one celebrated, kind of thing. Anyway, move back to this text. Jerusalem in verse 6. Remember, we're moving. There's a transition here between what was said in Isaiah's prayer, the prophet's prayer, and now we'll move to the idea of the watchman. Jerusalem, I have appointed watchmen on your walls, and they will never be silent, day or night. There is no rest for you who remind the Lord. Do not give him rest until he establishes and makes Jerusalem the praise of the earth. One Jewish theologian points out that some of the more ancient Jewish commentators viewed these watchmen as being angelic or angels. And the angels' function was to do this very thing. They would never sleep, day or night. They did not receive any kind of rest. And they were reminding God of His promise to make Jerusalem a place of peace known throughout the earth. And you can see, I'm sure you are picking up on some of this. This is simply, I don't think it's hyperbole or overstatement. I know it is, yes, it's poetic in its form, but it's pointing out something about what God is going to do. And I would suggest to you, still yet future, with Jerusalem. I don't see how Jerusalem, one of the most contested cities in the world, historically speaking, even to today, how that city can be a place that would be known as the praise of the earth, a place of peace, and unless the Prince of Peace is reigning there. Let me pause for a moment before we get to the next section. Comments or questions? There is something I skipped over that I want to go back and retrieve. And that's back in verse 3. You will be a glorious crown in the Lord's hand, and a royal diadem in the palm of your God's hand. Now the two words for hand there are actually two different Hebrew words. One is the idea of holding, the other one is idea of an open hand, like a palm. And that's where we find that in verse there. But what is this crown and royal diadem? Well, normally a diadem is what we think of as a crown, right? The same Jewish author that I was speaking of a while ago, he's a Christian, by the way. He believes that this is a fulfillment, I think, of Exodus chapter 19, where God's people would be known as a kingdom of priests. That was to be their function. They never did live up to that, but he believes that this is going to be an occasion where that was going to be the fulfillment of that. So the idea of a diadem and a glorious crown is the turban that the priests would wear, a particular a particular headdress. And that was his estimation of that. Okay, verse 8. The Lord has sworn with his right hand and his strong arm, I will no longer give your grain to your enemies for food, and foreigners will not drink the new wine, for which you have labored. For those who gather the grain will eat it, and praise the Lord, and those who harvest the grapes will drink the wine in my holy courts. As the promise continues in the kind of the same section, we're sticking with the watchman, that there's going to be a time when what Israel, how they prosper, is not going to be taken by foreigners, outside kingdoms coming in and taking it. They're familiar with this in the ancient world. They're familiar with the you may remember the Philistines and the raids that they would come into these Jewish communities, and they would steal their food. They would steal their produce. Maybe you might remember a particular individual named Gideon. That was going on, and they had their vat in a hidden place to keep it away from. So I think it was the Philistines, wasn't it? The Philistines, when they come in and raiders, they wouldn't come in and take the stuff that they were raising. So you have that particular important function too. Things are changing. Things have changed significantly, dramatically for Jerusalem. And in kind, the Israelis. The blessing there. Now let me pause for just a moment and kind of back up before we get to the last section. You can see, I think, the disdain that anti-Semitism has had probably for forever, at least ever since Israel was a nation. There has been this disdain for the Jewish people. And we've even said, we thought we had progressed beyond it. We're just 80 years removed from the death camps of Germany. And nevertheless, you can still see it raise itself up in a very, very concerning manner. I don't guess I have to describe it too far. And mainly, the majority of it is from the institutions of higher learning, universities, colleges, some of the very well-known ones, that actually seem to fan the flames of anti-Semitism. And my question, and I've asked it before, and some of you have answered it before, why? Why such disdain for the descendants of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob? Well, I think it has everything to do with God's choice of a people. And I don't want to go and leave you kind of fuzzy. Just because a person is a Jew does not automatically mean that they're saved. Okay? I'm not really looking at it from that perspective at all. But I will suggest to you that they are still a part of God's chosen people. Not necessarily that they are saved people. I think someone has made the comment about John Hagee. He said there's two ways to be saved. One is to be trust Christ, and the other is to be a Jew. I don't think that's right. Paul would argue vehemently against such a position. No, that is not the case. But God made an everlasting covenant to the descendants of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. And even though we have some Christian pastors, theologians, church members that have a view that Israel has just failed at what she was supposed to do, therefore she has been replaced with the church, so Israel is really non-essential anymore, not a part of what God's plan is anymore. And I just disagree totally with that. And I'm not trying to work out any here, other than to point out, when you look at what Paul writes in Romans chapters 9, 10, and 11, in chapter 11, I think it's verse 29, 25, 29, one of those, it's simply the calling and the gifting of God is irrevocable. He doesn't give you any wobble room there. I remember one of my professors, he read a letter in class that he had written to someone who had asked him a question about how do you interpret that section of Romans. And he had been trained in a particular perspective where he actually said he didn't know exactly how to deal with it. I don't know why I remember a particular phrase, but I do remember a particular phrase that he used in that letter. He said something to the effect, perhaps with a more mature understanding, I'll be able to answer your question, or something like that. I remember he said a more mature understanding. He was kind of kicking the can down the road that maybe one day he'll understand it. I don't think it's as difficult to understand as he feared it was. The problem was it didn't fit his theological structure. So he didn't understand it. Because his theological commitment would be more like, he wasn't a replacement theologian per se, but he did not see Israel as a major factor in the end times or in God's plan. He just didn't see Israel as a major player there anymore, so he didn't know really what to do with that particular passage. And I think in all fairness, that would be probably somewhat of an accurate way of describing it, at least it seems so to me. But God He made a choice of a people. They didn't live up to His standards. They did not carry out His mission. But nevertheless, He committed Himself to them. And if God, and I hope I'm not saying this, overstating this, or making it too strong, but if God can just simply abandon Israel forever, what makes you think He can't do the same with us? As a matter of fact, Paul implies that by talking about Gentiles being a wild olive grafted in. And if He can do that, He can ungraft us and put the tame olive back there. We talk about Israel. And then there are those things that, one day all Israel will be saved. Not every single Jew, but there's going to be a mass turning of Jews to Christ. And I just think that just seems to fit. I don't have to come up with any kind of clever way of working through those passages. I don't have to come up with some sort of very unique interpretation to kind of explain away those kind of statements. I just think that Israel still has a very important place. And I think this illustrates it. Questions or comments? Everybody still awake? I know it's kind of warm and stuffy in here.
But would that be kind of like, when people try to say that Israel is not relevant? I mean, look about 25 years ago or 50 years ago, things that we didn't think would be happening are happening now. Just because we can't see over the hill, that Israel may not be relevant, doesn't mean it's not going to be.
Which is true.
It's kind of like the Trinity too.
Yeah. There's things that have happened that we should see the more significance to it than I think sometimes we think of it. When in history has a people of antiquity, of the ancient times, when did they lose their homeland and then regain it? 2,000 years later. When it was prophesied they would. God said He would call His people from all the four corners of the earth. He would call them back. When the Jews, 1948 in May, what's the date? I think it's May 14. I think. I'll have to look it up. I think it was May 14, 1948. Anyway, whether the date's right or not, I don't know. But that's just a remarkable miracle right there. And then Israel's ability to survive as a nation up to this point, when it's just a small little speck. It's not very big. And it's surrounded by enemies. And it still thrives. a lot of the stuff that you and I enjoy today, in some places Israel has a hand in some of the development of technology. And I've told you before that you can drive down toward the Dead Sea, and you know why they call the Dead Sea, don't you? Because it's dead. Okay? That's a great revelation there. But when you get down in some of those fields down there, you see, it depends on what time of year you're there, but to be sure. But they are blooming. The desert is blooming. The strides that the Israelis have made in taking useless land, or what appears to be useless land, and making it productive is phenomenal. It's amazing. It really is. And I saw something the other day, and I think it's genuine. At the northern end of the Dead Sea, there are fish, which is a new thing. So the Dead Sea one day not be quite as dead. I don't know about that part. Yes?
Pastor, is it prophetic that so many countries are after them or they hate them?
Yeah, it is. It is. Israel is surrounded by enemies. And that is prophetic. Because, even here we have a mention of enemies.
They're glad for the Patriot missiles.
Well, their Iron Dome is very, very effective. Yeah. And whatnot. It's just really, it's amazing when you begin looking at it. That they even still exist. You can't find any Amorites or Perizzites or Amalekites or any of those. They've been lost in the ancient world. Hittites, any of their descendants have been absorbed into other people groups. And but you still find Jews. Well, I'm not going to. I had a thought, but I'm going to keep that thought. Okay. You don't need it. Look at verse 10. Go out through the city gates. Prepare a way for the people. Build up the highway. Clear away the stones. Raise a banner for the peoples. Okay. We'll look at the next part of it in just a moment. But there is a very clear indication of something there. And the clear indication is not only what you find later in Malachi, and also you find in the Gospels in reference to John the Baptist, of what his role is, but when royalty was coming to your community, you prepared your community. If you had rough roads, you made them as smooth as you could, showing that you were desiring for this royalty, this king to come. You prepared. When you know he was coming. You have that picture, I think, here. Go out throughout the city gates, prepare a way for the people, build it up, build up a highway, clear away the stones, raise a banner for the peoples. Behold, or look, the Lord has proclaimed to the ends of the earth, say to the daughter of Zion, look, or behold, your salvation is coming. Okay, again, let's kind of pause right there. Daughters of Zion. I always wondered what that was, and if I got the right information, I'll pass that on to you as the way I received it. The daughters of Zion. What in the world is the daughters of Zion? Well, according to one theologian that I was watching a video of a number of years ago, he described the daughters of Zion as being those villages, unwalled villages all around Jerusalem. These little encampments where people were living. There was no protection for them. There was no wall of protection if they were under siege or anything like that. They'd have to flee to the city where there was a wall and where there were soldiers and that kind of thing. So the daughters of Zion were all of those little villages around. And it's just telling them these smaller communities, say to the daughters of Zion, or the daughter of Zion, look, your salvation is coming. His wages are with him. And his reward accompanies him. And they will be called the holy people, the Lord's redeemed. And you will be cared for, or you'll be called cared for, a city not deserted. Interesting, again, these royal terms. He's coming. What is he bringing? Well, your salvation is coming. His wages are with him. His reward accompanies him. And they will be called the holy people. Now, let's talk about the word holy for a moment. We've done this before at other times. When you hear the word holy, what do you think of? I mean, there's two primary ways of understanding the word holy. Both apply, of course. Holy, basically at its heart, means to be set apart. And we've talked about that before. But holy also means something else. Holy is really a state of being of a pure, righteous, just person. Now, God is holy. God, everything about God is holy. Means it is, like we've seen, I don't know, is it chapter 55? My thoughts are not your thoughts. My ways are not your ways, says the Lord. He's different than us. You got that? He's different than us. So, everything about God's holy. His love is holy. His wrath is holy. His justice is holy. His righteousness is holy. Everything that is his very nature is holy. That does mean set apart, but it also has a connotation of absolute moral purity. That's why God cannot tolerate sin. Because He's morally pure. He can't tolerate it. He cannot keep it. He can't bear with it, as it were. He just simply can't. So that's why the only way for us to be acceptable in God's presence is that our sin be taken care of. And it's not just simply as easy as God saying, "I forgive you." That won't do it. A lot of people don't get that. It's not enough. Matter of fact, God simply can't, unless sin is atoned or paid for. It has to be. Not just anybody can do that. Not just anybody is able to accomplish that. If we could accomplish it on our own, there would be no reason for Jesus to have come to begin with. Because we could just pull ourselves up by our bootstraps and we could live a holy life and be able to please God. No, we can't do that. We can't do that. Because everything that you and I do, in one sense or another, has the taint of sin upon it. Everything we do. Even when we try to do good things, we may not be as good as we think we are when we're trying to do it. But Jesus was able, God in the flesh, to live an absolute, perfect, sinless life. That's it. And since He did what we can't, God made it possible through Him and His sacrifice. You see, sin has to be paid for. It has to be punished. You can pay it yourself if you want. It'll take forever, and you'll never get it paid off. Or you can trust Jesus that He did it in your place. And it's only in that sin being atoned for through Christ that you and I could ever have the hope of coming before a holy, righteous God and forever live in His presence. Because do you remember our first parents? I don't know if that's the right way of saying it or not. Adam and Eve. They had the relationship and the opportunity and a regular experience of walking with God prior to the fall, right? What was the first thing when they rebelled against God and ate of the forbidden fruit? What was the first thing that happened? They wanted to hide from God. They were wanting to hide from Him. That relationship now was estranged. It was broken. And God Himself had to take the initiative to do something about it. And He took an animal, made skins for them to cover themselves. And you can see that there and all the way through the Bible. That particular need that we have. And it's only through Him. But there would come a time, holy is not only moral purity, but also being set apart. Now, a holy people is a people who are set apart from all other people. You know, just like I've used a silly illustration, it's not silly, but a simplistic illustration. This one does too. It says Holy Bible on the back. It means holy book. It means book. This book is unlike any other book. I could go to the Library of Congress and look at all of the thousands and thousands and hundreds of thousands of books that are in there, and every single one of them falls in a category, or in different categories, but there is none that can be with this book. As a matter of fact, before you go into the Library of Congress, guess what you see out there displayed? You have a Bible. You have a Bible. It's on the outside of entering in. Of course, it's in a glass case, and it's a very, very valuable Bible, to be sure. But that's what you find. You find a Bible. Well, anyway, you'll notice that you'll be called a holy people, a people set apart, a people, and the Lord's redeemed. And we've talked about that word before. To redeem something means what? It means to buy it back, you know. You know, sometimes not that I have no experience at this, I just saw it on TV. But if you have something you take to a pawn shop, they'll give you a ticket for it, and you can come back in a certain period of time. You come back and you can redeem that item that you have put in hock there. After a certain period of time, it's too late. They can sell it to somebody else, but you can redeem it, and it means buy it back. You have a very beautiful picture in Hebrew culture of yesteryear of the so-called kinsman redeemer, the Goel. And you see that, of course, in the story of the account of Ruth. The Goel. Boaz becomes the Goel, the kinsman redeemer. It doesn't set well with us because we don't see this culture. But when a man, when he died, maybe he had quite a bit of material possessions, money and whatnot, land. The oldest son got the majority of it. And then the remaining sons would get a little slice. And you'd think that the oldest son would be an object of jealousy by his younger brothers, wouldn't you? You sure would in our culture, wouldn't you? You'd have lawsuits and you'd have all kinds of stuff going on because that's not fair. Well, in Jewish culture of yesteryear, it wasn't considered fair in that sense, but the younger brothers would celebrate. To them it was wonderful because the older brother now became responsible for them. If they did something stupid, he would have to bail them out. Let me give you a quick example of that. Even though it's not called a Goel, but he does the function of a Goel. That's Abraham. Abraham, when Lot and the city of Sodom was captured. Do you remember what Abraham did? When he got word of it, he and about 325 of his men, that's pretty good entourage there, they basically, here's this old man leading the pack, they ran all night. And when they got to where, up in Dan, in the northern part of Israel, when they got there, they won the battle and they freed the captives and brought the stuff that was taken back down. And why did Abraham do that? Why would he do that? I mean, Lot is the one that chose the best land to graze his flocks on. He left poor old Abraham out in the desert But he took the plush area. But why did Abraham do that? Well, Abraham was the elder. So when Lot found himself in trouble, who's going to bail him out? Abraham did. Abraham did. So that's what it means to be redeemed. It means bought back. And these holy people are the Lord's redeemed. That's what makes them a holy people. It's not their moral purity. It's their being set apart because they are the Lord's redeemed. And as Christians, that's exactly what we are. We are the Lord's redeemed. And you will be called, cared for, a city, not deserted. So the entire chapter is forward-looking, future-oriented, to a time when these descriptive phrases about Jerusalem can actually come to fruition, come to completion. And that's just simply not today, but one day will be. All right, any closing thoughts or comments?
It is May 14th, that's the right date.
Is it the right date? May 14th? Okay. Just occurred to me when I looked at my thing. Oh, yeah, it is the 14th. So that's a date to remember a miracle. And don't think for a moment, or don't doubt for a moment that God moves history and those that are making history in the way He desires. He sure did.
Isn't there a verse that says, can a nation be born in a day? Is there somewhere?
It can be, yeah. All right, well, thank you so much for paying attention to that. And we'll pick up there next time.